Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's topic might be tough for some individuals, but know for a fact that we are here to help you out. Suicide. Are you thinking about suicide as an option for you? Things might be overwhelming for some individuals who gets to the point of ending their own life. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and the big downside is that it can have a huge impact in the life of those around you. To know more about suicide and the importance of preventing it, we've got Marlene Lim, a community pharmacist, a council member of Malaysian Pharmaceutical Society, but also a counselor and a mental health first aid instructor on the topic of World Suicide Prevention Day. Hi, Marlene. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello. Hi, Rizvani.
Hi.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. So, straight to the topic. Could you first let us know what World Suicide Prevention Day is all about?
Thank you for the question, Rizvani. So World Suicide Prevention Day, it falls on 10 September every year. It is organized by the International Association for Suicide Prevention, and it's also co-sponsored by World Health Organization. So this important day, it aims to bring awareness that suicide can be prevented. So for year 2020, the theme for World Suicide Prevention Day is working together for suicide prevention.
Okay. Why was there a need to have this awareness?
It's very simple. So many people around the world, they do not understand the importance of mental health, what are mental illness and what can we do about it. And furthermore, there's a strong stigma that surrounds it. And these are all due to lack awareness and understanding. And when we don't understand an issue, we tend to do a few things. We either ignore it, we may pass unnecessary judgment, we create myths and stories that are untrue, and it just gets passed on to more people and more generations. And it's very sad because if only people just willing to listen and be educated, we can save lives and we can reduce the disease burden and create a more caring, compassionate community, which I believe is such an important aspect towards building a progressive country. So in Malaysia, you're looking at a suicide rate of 5.5 per 100,000 populations. Yes, and data indicate a rise in suicide numbers since 10 years ago. And I mean, you and I know our mental health care system in Malaysia is quite burdened because you have limited number of mental health professionals per large amount of population. So you can imagine people suffering from mental health problems and having suicidal thoughts. They may not get the necessary and timely treatment. So awareness about suicide and its prevention is very important because highly likely it could lead to life being saved and people getting the appropriate help. So we hope for this day that we can understand the issue together, we debunk myths about suicide, we share accurate information, and we build skills on how to intervene and assist someone who needs help, and most importantly, leading towards decriminalization of suicide.
Suicide is definitely an important topic and it should be brought to everyone's attention immediately. You also mentioned that suicide case has been going up since the past 10 years. But now since the movement control order started 6 months ago, suicide cases, or at least attempts, have increased tremendously. In your opinion, why do you think individuals die by suicide? Or at least they try to attempt to do so?
That's a very hard question, isn't it? It's not easy to understand. It's not easy to understand why and what caused a person to end their life or have the desire to do so, especially for those who never experienced such overwhelming feelings or emotions before. And therefore, we need to educate and equip ourselves with accurate information. First of all, it is important to know that suicide, it does not discriminate. So it doesn't matter what gender, age, race, background, anyone can be at risk, but there are risk factors for suicide. So you're looking at biological, physiological, environmental factors, and so on.
Yeah.
So one of the main factors is having a mental illness, which includes things like depression, anxiety, and many others. And a previous suicide attempt is also a risk factor, family history, having any types of medical condition, being between the age of 15 and 24 years of age, or over the age of 60, previous abuse history, whether it can be physical, sexual, emotional abuse, social isolation. And it's also important to know that there are certain groups of people at higher risk, marginalized communities due to their race, color of their skin, sexual orientation, people who are homeless, people with disabilities. But then again, it is important to know as well that having these risk factors do not automatically means that you will attempt suicide. You can't really predict who will act on the suicidal thoughts. But of course, knowing the warning signs definitely helps. So back to the specific question, you still wonder but why do people die by suicide or attempt to do so, right? With all that risk factors in mind. So when you ask people with lived experience of mental illness or those who have experienced suicidal thoughts and behaviors, some of them shared the need to relieve emotions and feelings that is overwhelming and unbearable and unmanageable. And the only way is to end their life. And some of the words that I use to describe this, right? It's thoughts and feelings of hopelessness, emptiness, worthless, meaningless. The words that I just shared, it doesn't really do it justice at all, because unless you've been there before, you really don't understand. So just how these things can consume a person. And some also shared that they believe they are a burden and the world is a better place without them. At times, it's also a cry for help and the need to communicate and be listened to. So with movement control order, we are talking about isolation, loss of jobs, income, business closure, sudden drastic change of routine, the immediate need or expectation to cope, and then loss or lack of support, like people can't connect with their usual family members and all that, and the financial stress to provide necessities, fear, worry, stress, anxiety, the unknown, and compounded with existing medical condition or mental illness, either it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, all of this just keep compounding on and on. So, and Malaysians, I'm not sure what do you think, Rizvani, that a lot of us actually do not have the skills to help ourselves or even help someone else with mental issues or suicidal thoughts. And then I mentioned just now that we don't really have a very, it's already overburdened, the mental health support system and the stigma and lack of awareness. So I guess that's why there is an increase in suicide or suicide attempts during COVID-19.
Yes. Another thing is when there's no one to talk about how you're feeling, or at least try to make people understand what you're going through, it gets even tougher for those individuals.
Yeah, you can imagine when someone tell another person that I feel like ending my life or I have these kind of thoughts. People tend to get very judgmental, and sometimes they think they are doing the right thing by saying, oh, what about your family and things like that. It's actually not the right thing to say as well.
And sometimes it's also taken for granted. They try to make a joke about it, but they do not understand how important it is to acknowledge that kind of situations.
Yes, you use the word Rizvani, acknowledge. Yes.
It's definitely heartbreaking to know that many people are actually thinking about suicide and they do not have anyone to talk about it.
Yes, indeed. It's very sad. Yeah.
So, are there any particular warning signs that family members, friends, or even colleagues could identify when someone might try to attempt a suicide?
So there are many warning signs. I wouldn't say there's a particular one,
Okay.
because everyone is different, and sometimes some people may not exhibit any warning signs at all.
Okay.
But usually you are able to notice the person being different than usual. And that is also why it's so important to constantly check in on your friends and families, because in this era, we are quite consumed with our work and house chores and other things, and phone. And we forgot the very important things in life, that, people matters to us, and that's very important. But some of the warning signs that is quite obvious. The first one is definitely talking about it or venting about it, that they want to die or they want to kill themselves. And this include posting about it on social media as well. Okay, so that's like one very obvious one. And also people talk about there's no reason to stay, or like the feeling I mentioned, like feeling hopelessness, emptiness, planning or researching a way to kill themselves, talking about guilt or shame, feeling unbearable pain. And people also talk about themselves being a burden. I mentioned about this as well. Even talking about the need to take revenge can be a sign. Changing habits, sleeping and all that, withdrawing themselves, reckless or risky behaviors, especially out of normal, extreme mood swings, giving away prized possession. If someone loved their Star Wars collection and suddenly call and say, "Hey, Marley, I want you to have it," you'd be like, "Okay, hang on now. What's going on?" Feeling more agitated or anxious, substance use or increased substance use, talking about death, arranging things in order, like making a will or giving away their, their beloved pet, and so on. So when you listen to it, I mean, you feel like, wow, that's quite a list. But then if you care and you're concerned, just checking on them, ask directly, let them know you care and want to help, and most importantly, set aside your judgment and just be there for them.
True. And another thing is also how technology has caused people to move away from each other, which is why there's not much communication, even when everyone is living in the same household.
Yes. Yes, and a lot of us are guilty of it,
True.
Like, even if I'm speaking of it, sometimes I realize that, I haven't been checking on some people a lot, and the movement control order is either you get to connect or you get to disconnect. And I decide to connect. I start to look through the message, I haven't talked to this person, send a message, ask them, "Hey, how are you?" Just to connect. And I think self-awareness and realization when things are a bit different need to be there. And that's when we realize that, during the movement control order, in the end, human beings, that feeling, that connection is so important.
Yep, true. Okay. Now, speaking about suicide prevention and all, what do you think are the goals of suicide intervention, and how can community help combat this issue?
I would say the goals of suicide prevention is to reduce deaths by suicide and suicidal behaviors, to keeping the person safe, help them get the help that they need, and then empower them with skills to live life that they want. So first of all, it's important to acknowledge that suicide is not just a mental health issue. It's actually a public health issue that needs to be addressed through holistic approach. So it involves not only efforts from the government and corporate sectors, but also workplace. This is another thing. Workplace needs to adopt a policy and effort adopting mental health support for their employees, healthcare professionals, education, the media, and community. So how can community help to combat the issue? So I believe in two things. The first one is the power of education. So we need to be educated. Why, how, what, in terms of helping someone with mental health problems and mental health crisis. And then second is the power of empathy. And empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, or in other words, put yourself in another person's shoes. So through empathy, we listen. And it's just not listening, it's actually active listening with compassion and without judgment. And sometimes this doesn't come naturally. We are not perfect after all. But if we put effort to be educated about the issue and we strive to learn and improve ourselves so we can help others that we care about, then as a community, I believe we can definitely combat the issue. So we need to be educated and to have empathy. Because one of the biggest barrier to mental health awareness is stigma.
Yes.
And through the power of education, empathy, we empower ourselves, the individuals and the communities, and then we help others who are suffering in silence.
Yep, true. And then I think, I personally think that in schools and university, they should start talking, or, at least explaining, like have like a session just to talk about all this type of suicide, depression, what you should do, what you should not do, how can you approach the teachers or lecturers. Because as you mentioned earlier, that from the age of 15 to 24, there's so many people who are trying to attempt suicide or has already done it. So I think it should start at a very young age.
You are very right, Ritzvani. You mentioned a few things just now starting at school. So in some country, it's not just the school, the Ministry of Education, they implement mindfulness in kindergarten and primary school.
Amazing.
Mindfulness.
Yep.
I know. And in Australia, we have mental health first aid, not just for general adults, but also mental health first aid for youth and teen. So for the teen, right?
Yep.
It's teaching another teenager how to help another teenager. Because sometimes, they don't really turn to adults.
Yep. Yes.
And if another teenager of certain age, they're being approached issues like this, they don't know what to do. Sure. So educating them, like you said, starting from young is so important. So that's a very good point.
Yeah, true. We believe, I believe, you believe, I think everyone should believe that suicide is definitely an important topic to be brought up as soon as possible. Yes. And we know that the effect on those impacted by suicide is lasting, and we believe that every suicide is preventable. And also, mental health can be a difficult topic to address, but anything mentionable is definitely manageable, So, is there anything you would like to tell to our viewers? Like any advice you would like to share on?
There's in terms of advice, I think first of all, like I said, we need to read up, be educated. And if you don't know anything, even like, everyone, when someone asks you how to cook, how to do this, you'll be said, just go to YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and just, type mental health issues or how to help someone with suicide, there will be a lot of very good information coming from mental health professionals, but of course be aware how to screen through people who have the right skills to teach you that. So that's the first tip, is that if you feel that you don't know about it, let's get some information, go online and read up, And then second thing is that the other tips I could give is that when people approach you with such behaviors or thoughts and you don't know what to do, and you don't, of course, that's not the best time to go online and Google, right? All you need to do is just stay calm, listen. And sometimes you don't even need to talk. Serious,
you don't need to respond,
Yes. So, sometimes you just need to listen. Be there for the person. And if it's appropriate, if it's someone you're very close with, even holding their hands, looking at them and just nod your head, okay,
Yep.
And then at the end of the day, you're not there to provide a solution.
Yes.
You just need to be there to listen. And one other thing is that after the whole thing, you listen and you're stuck, you don't know what to do. One thing you can say is, let's get some help. Let's connect to professional help and get some help. I may not be equipped to help you, but I really care. And I believe there are people out there with the same problem. and there are people out there that can help you, you know.
Yes.
And another tip I can give is that most people would say no.
Okay. Yep.
So what happens when people say no to everything, and you struggle and you get stressed? Don't lecture, don't threaten, don't force them, you know.
Yep.
Just let them know it's okay. When you're ready, I'm here. And if you ever need to talk again, I'm here.
Yes.
That's good enough. And also let the person know that, you know, do you want, you know, like if it's a girlfriend of mine, I'll be like, do you want to stay over with me tonight, or do you want me to stay over?
Yes.
You know, if you feel unsafe though, if you feel that, oh, I really feel stressed, I am stressed, and I think that this sounds really serious, then it might be a time to call, you know, the contact that's available, Talian or Befrienders, they're 24 hours, and just tell them the situation that you're in, you can do instead of, you know, Googling, because Googling is like general information. You want to get educated. But when you're in the spot, you want specific, individualized advice.
Yes.
So if you're in that situation, you don't know what to do, and you don't want to make a mistake by saying things that you shouldn't, then call up, get some help.
Yep. I think what they need the most is a shoulder to lean on.
Yes, and I forgot to mention one last tip. Asking directly. This is something that a lot of people will be asking. Like, are you sure? You know, they can, if they're not sure, they can send an email to me and I can direct them even more. It's actually asking directly. So if you suspect anyone with thoughts or suicidal behaviors, or even the slightest suspect, or even the person said, I feel like I want to die. When people say that, you're like, is he talking about suicide? I'm not sure. Most importantly, just ask directly. Because when you're not sure, how can you be sure? And the only way to be sure about it is to ask. I'm sorry, my dear, but I have to ask this question because I really care. Have you been having suicidal thoughts or behaviors? Just ask directly. And when I was doing the courses, people always said that you're putting thoughts in the head, you know? By asking that, you're making people want to do it. I'm like, no. You know, clinical research data have shown that it doesn't put thoughts in other people's head, but instead you are making sure an answer that you want to know, and you're actually keeping them safe. And it's the only way that you can do it, by asking directly. And a person that does not have suicidal thoughts or behaviors will confidently and comfortably telling you, and no. But if the person doubt and said, I'm not sure, you know, if they're doubting, that means that there's an element to it. And you'd be like, you know, it's okay. It's normal to have such thoughts. And I'm here to help you. I'm here because I care, you know. So that's how you go about it. So asking directly, it's okay. And it's one of the things that during the courses that I conduct, it's one of the hardest thing to grab on and understand and build the skill. But as you practice and you accept it, and then you really care, it becomes natural to you.
Yep, I definitely agree with you that if anyone shows any sorts of symptoms or feeling suicidal, it is important for you to immediately ask them, or at least try to seek help immediately.
Yes.
So I think that's all for today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on one of the most important topics, suicide. We hope that everyone who's watching, please know for a fact that life should be safe and it should not be taken for granted.
Yes, thank you, Rizvani, and thank you to the listeners, our viewers as well. And before we end the session, I would like to share some information that in case if you need to seek help, Malaysia Befrienders, 03-7627-2929. This is something that Rizvani going to put down under the video as well. It's available 24 hours. Talian No 15999 is also available 24 hours. But if in any case you have such symptoms, or you need to bring someone to medical attention, emergency of the hospitals. In KL, UKM, UPM, USM, UITM, UIA, UMMC, private clinics, they are all ready to help you. And even pharmacists. Yes, come to the pharmacist. We are equipped with the skill to recognize the signs and symptoms and to refer you to appropriate professional help. So, be brave. We are all here to help. It's okay. It takes time. And hopefully our viewers today have some good insight about suicide. Thank you.
Yep, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome, Rizvani. My pleasure.